Now, I've been poking around recently looking for a definitive list of what constitutes conservative values, and it should be no surprise, no such list exists. Oh sure, there are plenty of people who will tell you their personal values, but these lists tend to be not only individualistic, but contradictory between them. There seems to be no universal conservative values, or universal liberal values for that matter. So I came across a list, and this is an old list and may very well be out of date with current culture, but it goes over the disagreement between so-called liberal values and conservative values on a variety of topics. So I figured I'd find out where I fell, and surprisingly, I often disagree with both sides and fall somewhere in the middle. So let's see what happens when I take a look at a list of political values. First, and they do these in alphabetical order, comes abortion. Now, I've already made my views on abortion known, and I do support legal abortion, at least through the end of the second trimester, and thereafter for the life and health of the mother or for gross fetal deformity. So, where do I disagree? Well, on the so-called conservative side, and I really hate calling it that because for far too many, conservatism means evangelical Christianity, and I reject that entirely. But they're concerned with a fetus being genetically human. So what? I don't think being human makes us intrinsically valuable. Sure, we might be special to ourselves, that's a matter of survival, but beyond our own attachment to ourselves, humans are just animals. We're not magically special. Every single one of us doesn't have to survive. I'm sorry, but that's simply the case. So denying abortion because we have an inordinate attachment to ourselves, often for absurd religious reasons, that makes no sense to me. But by the same token, I think people need to be personally responsible for their decisions, and that includes decisions that lead up to pregnancy. If you act like an idiot and engage in practices that you're unwilling to see through to their logical conclusion, you've got some problems. Now, clearly, a fetus is a human life because it's genetically human. That doesn't mean it's necessarily protected life under the law, which is why abortion is legal nationwide, and I strongly think it should remain so. I think both men and women should be personally and individually responsible for the decisions they make in their lives. I don't think abortion should be an out for people who were too stupid to consider the consequences of their actions. But then again, people that dumb probably shouldn't have children in the first place. So I guess I'm somewhere in the middle of both of these positions. Next, we move on to affirmative action, and I, for one, am not a fan at all. I fall in line pretty much with the conservative side here that race, gender, sexual orientation, pretty much anything but one's skill and intelligence should not be considered at all for any educational or employment opportunities, period. I don't care about racism in the past. I care about what's going on today, and you can't solve racism in the past with even more racism today. It just doesn't work that way. If we're going to be a non-racist society, and I firmly believe we should be, then it starts right now. Effective immediately, there is no race-based or gender-based hiring or educational discrimination allowed, period. It just stops happening. Now, I do support anti-discrimination laws, and I think that anyone who is caught engaging in these kinds of discriminatory practices needs civil and criminal prosecution, depending on what's going on. Individuals who try to discriminate based on race or gender or orientation or religion, those people need to be punished. It cannot be acceptable, except under a very few conditions that I can think of. You hire people for their skill. You educate people for their knowledge. You need to live in a meritocracy. The death penalty. I am completely in favor of the death penalty. In fact, I don't think we use it nearly often enough. And I'm not at all swayed by the liberal whining about, oh no, what if they're innocent? Well, if they are, we learn a lesson and we don't do it again. Humanity is not now, nor will it ever be perfect. Sorry, Welcome to reality. I think there are some crimes for which the convicted have simply given up their right to breathe the same air as decent people. I don't limit this to just murderers either. I think serial rapists and child molesters, they ought to get their tickets punched too. I also don't think life without the possibility of parole ought to exist. If you're never getting out, if you will forever be a danger to society, such that your debt to society can never be paid, then what's the point of keeping you around? Put you down like the rabid dog you are, and clear the cell for someone we might be able to rehabilitate. Remember, I don't think people are inherently special just because they're people. I don't think there's any inherent right to life. Actions have consequences, and there are actions that are so utterly heinous that your life is forfeit. Let's stop playing games and clean up the shallow end of the gene pool. Moving on to the economy. Now, I will say that I entirely disagree that what they describe as the liberal position is, in fact, the modern liberal position. But then again, I don't think the classical liberals are still liberals today. They're closer to libertarians or conservatives. But I'll answer this as I think it actually is. And I support a responsible, fiscally conservative economy. I think we need to live within our means. I think a free market gives us the best chance, both in the short and long term, for financial success and sustained growth. But I do think that the government needs to ensure that the marketplace remains fair and equal. And this is where I don't think that what is described here is actually liberal, because liberals today, especially as you move farther to the left, are socialist or in extreme cases, communist. That's the case in 2017, which probably wasn't as true in 2005 when this was written. I don't want the government controlling what businesses can do, except to keep specific businesses from having undue power and influence over the markets. And this is the case today with Google. They need to be broken up because they're both engaged in anti-competitive practices and interfering with free speech and dissemination of political argumentation. Here again, I have to disagree with both sides when it comes to education. I don't think that public education is inherently the best means for educating children, but neither do I want vouchers that allow parents to put their children into religious indoctrination centers. I think we need to up our game across the board and have serious standards for what we consider education that no one, for any reason, can get their children out of. I don't care what your reasons are, religious, moral, political, it doesn't matter to me. All I care about is getting children educated with the facts, excising the political rhetoric, and making them solid, productive citizens. Because right now, neither side wants anything to do with that. The left wants to raise children to be good little liberals that vote Democrat. The right wants to raise children to be good little Christians who vote Republican. Neither have the good of the children or ultimately the good of the nation at heart. They just want to be in power. This nonsense has to end. The whole purpose of education is to produce intelligent, productive, rational citizens that benefit us all. This is something that absolutely terrifies both sides, and frankly, if it scares them, it's probably something we ought to want. On to embryonic stem cell research. Now, I'm totally in favor of it, and therefore fall more on the liberal side, as described here, than the conservative side. But then again, I'm also in favor of abortion rights, so why would we waste a valuable resource that we're otherwise just going to be throwing away? Harvest stem cells, with the permission of the parents, of course, and then get to work curing diseases. It makes no sense whatsoever to do otherwise. I really don't know what else to say on this one. And again, I'm going to come down somewhere in the middle on this because I think that energy exploration is a good thing in general. Improving on technology is the right path to take in virtually all cases. That doesn't mean we have to demonize oil. It also doesn't mean that we need to accept lesser performance and greater cost for the sake of the tree-hugging idiots. And that's what a lot of people on the political left want us to do right now. Embrace electric cars that cost more and are far less efficient and practical than what we already have. Sorry, that's stupid. come up with something that works as well or better than what we already have and costs the same or less. If you can save the environment at the same time, great, that's a bonus. But things like wind and solar simply cannot replace oil when it comes to automobiles. They're also not great for providing large-scale power. Now, I'm totally on board with improving nuclear technology and developing other similar technologies when it comes to power production. We need to improve the overall situation, not teach people to be satisfied with less because it strokes their environmental button. Euthanasia and physician-assisted suicide. Totally in favor of it. And I don't think this needs to be limited to the terminally ill either. We're all terminally ill because life isn't eternal. We're all going to die. We all need to grow up as a species and deal with that reality. I think that anyone who wants to die for any reason they personally think is valid ought to be able to take their own life whenever they want without hordes of people whining about how horrible it is that anyone should ever die, period. Enough already. Granted, we probably have to set an age limit on it, but seriously, isn't it about time that we stop pretending that everyone has to be forced to live for the sake of the collective fear of death, whether they want to or not? It isn't like we're going to run out of people anytime soon. In fact, we could probably do with a few less people on the planet as it is. We need to get over our collective hyper-emotionalism. If people have the supposed right to life, then they need to have the right to die as they choose without being looked down on or considered insane. Yes, global warming happens, but the left's penchant to run around like the sky is falling, pointing fingers at just about everybody is just absurd. We're finding so many problems with their global warming predictions where they have to keep changing their predictions because they just never come true, and then they pop up when something goes wrong and say, "See, we were right all along!" It's just absurd. Now, again, I've got no problem with reducing carbon emissions if there's a better system to replace it. But until that happens, we don't change things that work for things that don't. And that's the heart of conservatism. Change only when change makes sense. And funny how there's always a profit motive on the left. Let's sell carbon credits, buy our new books, give us government grants and tax credits. Now, I'm not against profit by any means, but it seems like we've got a whole industry of environmental apologists busy passing around the collection plate, and when we find some of them saying in secret documents that they just have to keep telling people that the sky is falling or it will cut into their wallets, we have to be skeptical. I'd do it if the right were pulling that, and when it comes to religion, I absolutely do. So certainly, when the left does it, I'm going to do it there because they seem so utterly guilty. Another place where I will invariably fall into the middle is gun control. Both extremes are simply wrong. The far right, which wants private ownership of every weapon, including nuclear weapons for the real crazies, they're out of their minds. And the far left, which wants no weapons of any kind for anyone, including the military, they're similarly crazy. I think we need to universally disregard the crazies regardless of what side they're on. I've got no problem with private gun ownership so long as it's responsible private gun ownership, and that's something the right has no interest in talking about. And the abject paranoia I see on the right from people who think that if anyone knows they have a gun, the government will goose-step their way through the front door and confiscate it, that's just ridiculous. I don't care how much the idiots on the left might want that. It's not going to happen, at least not without throwing the Constitution out the window. And if that happens, you got more troubles than you can imagine. Both sides need to grow up. They need to act like adults. They need to stop being morons. It does the pro-gun side no good when there are lunatic preppers running around in the woods with guns pretending to shoot Obama. It just doesn't. Something tells me that these people aren't stable enough to have guns to begin with. So maybe they shouldn't. Sorry to break it to you, but healthcare is not a right. It just isn't. It's a responsibility, but not one the government is responsible for providing to you, but one that you are responsible for providing for yourself and your family. That said, our healthcare system is completely screwed up, and it's not the free market to blame necessarily, but how the system has been set up and how our society functions. First off, the whole insurance industry, especially when it comes to healthcare, is cancer. It's an unnecessary level of bureaucracy that drives costs through the roof for everyone. You have to remember that insurance, by its very nature, it's a betting game. The insurance company is betting that you will pay them more in premiums than they will pay out in costs. And you are betting that you will use more in costs than they will make in premiums. If you're right, you still lose because you're sick. It's a losing game for the consumer no matter what. You're either sick or being ripped off. Reducing or even eliminating the medical insurance industry will greatly reduce costs for healthcare. Secondly, the fact that Americans sue at the drop of a hat makes doctors carry absurd levels of malpractice insurance, even if they never do anything wrong. And of course, that raises costs. So long as we let anyone sue for any reason, and probably even worse, that we allow scumbag lawyers to make a mint chasing ambulances, our healthcare system will be vastly more expensive than anyone else's. We need to put hard caps on lawsuits, and more importantly, we need to hold lawyers personally and financially accountable for filing frivolous lawsuits. Fine offending lawyers $100,000 out of pocket for every frivolous lawsuit they file. But that's not going to happen. Why? Because most people in government office were once lawyers. Kind of convenient, huh? Homeland security is a mess. And airport security, of course, is a disaster. We as a nation won't even talk about who our enemies are because we're terrified to offend anyone. Well, screw that. Islam is the enemy. Not Muslims necessarily, but the religion and ideology of Islam. And we have every right to profile a religion that has been involved in thousands and thousands of terrorist attacks since 9/11. I don't care how these people feel. If they don't want to be profiled, get a better religion. Or better yet, get rid of their religion entirely. That would be better for everyone. I am so sick and tired of liberal whining. Sorry, but the reality is that some groups commit more crimes than other groups and therefore deserve extra scrutiny. And if that hurts their feelings, too bad. Maybe they should speak out against the criminals in their ranks. In a perfect world, that wouldn't be the case, but this isn't a perfect world. Suck it up, Buttercup. It's funny how more Muslims don't vehemently decry the violence done in the name of Islam, isn't it? And it's funny how more blacks don't vehemently decry the violence done by the black community. And any who try get called Uncle Toms and race traitors. You just can't win. I am solidly on the conservative side here. Illegal aliens are criminals. They are not undocumented workers. They're criminals. They have no right whatsoever to be here, regardless of their reasons for coming. And that includes their children. I think we need to end birthright citizenship, and we need to deport any of them we catch, and frankly, shoot any of them coming back. Now that might sound harsh, but I'm sick and tired of the catch and release nonsense that goes on. You throw them across the border, and 2 days later, they're back. I'm not convinced that we need a physical wall to stop them. We need to eliminate every single freebie that they've been able to get, from housing to education to employment, and especially all welfare and other monetary benefits. If you're not a citizen, you get nothing. You can die in the gutter for all I care. If you give them nothing, they won't come. The ones that are here will self-deport. Maybe they'll go back to their cesspool countries of origin and try to make things better there. Wouldn't that be a good thing? I think there are very, very few cases where eminent domain is necessary, although that is a non-zero number. But I think that in all cases where eminent domain is used, fair market value or more needs to be given to the people having their property taken. And frankly, I'd really rather be more than fair market value just to keep the government at bay. If the government has to pay the owner of a $50,000 piece of property $100,000 to get it, A, the owner's not going to be complaining, and the taxpayers are going to be really upset, and it had better be a damn good reason why the government had to have that piece of property. Seems like a fair check and balance to me. Religion and government should never, ever, ever mix. Not ever. The government needs to be completely neutral towards religious belief and religious institutions. In fact, I don't think they should treat them any differently than any other business. I find tax exemptions for the non-charitable work of churches to be criminal. If they're doing legitimate charity, fine. We'll give you a tax break for money actually used for charitable purposes. But paying non-related salaries and keeping up your golden temples? Forget it. And that ought to go for all charities. You get a break only for those things that are demonstrably charitable, but not for all the background costs. I really don't care what people believe. When it comes to the government, the only thing I care about is being responsible and realistic. Don't waste your time talking to imaginary friends. Do your damn job. If you want to talk to an imaginary man in the sky, go to a church, not a courthouse. There's a place for everything, and everything has a place. Try some organization for once. I'm totally in favor of same-sex marriage, or any marriage between two consenting adults. I just don't care, and I can't see why any rational person would. Of course, the religious are not rational people, which is why they hate it, but half of them probably hate interracial marriage too, so what more do I need to say? And frankly, the whole requiring citizens to sanction crap is just laughable. Nobody makes you like it, and nobody cares. But you do live in a free and open society where all people have the same rights. If you don't like that, feel free to find a more oppressive country to call home. This one isn't it. Or maybe you ought to reconsider that ridiculous religious nonsense that you've stuffed into your head and grow the hell up. That would be nice, wouldn't it? I have yet to see a single rational, non-religious reason why we should restrict marriage to one man and one woman. Anybody got one? Didn't think so. Social Security is a mess, mostly because the fund has been ripped off by politicians to such a degree that it requires young people to pay in so that the old people have anything to collect. And this is a crime, and everyone involved ought to be prosecuted and probably executed for treason. But of course, that won't happen. Heck, they won't even go after Hillary Clinton like they should. But this is something that I really don't see a solution for, unfortunately. You can't put the money back without going even further into debt. We really can't privatize it because the elderly need that money coming in that would otherwise go to private savings accounts. I've yet to see a fiscally responsible solution to this one, and I really don't know that there is one. People spent their entire lives putting into the fund, expecting to get that money back when they retired, and that money is long gone. Something clearly has to be done, but I've got no clue what it might be, and both political parties just want to kick that can right down the road. The left hate the rich, at least until it's rich people on their side of the aisle. Then they love their political contributions. The fact is, the government is far, far too large, and it shouldn't be trying to do most of what it does, and it needs to shrink by a significant margin. That would cut the need for as many taxes as they collect, which would allow that money to go into the free market and increase the economy, which is a net benefit for all. Unfortunately, the left also hates personal responsibility and holding people accountable, instead just wanting to buy votes by sending out as many government checks as they can every month. People need to be held accountable for their actions and learn to live within their means. If they aren't making enough money, they need to learn new skills, get better, higher paying jobs, and don't buy things they can't afford or have children they can't pay for, etc. But that would cost the left votes, wouldn't it? I hate the UN, so it will be no surprise that I detest the left's position. They want a one-world government under UN rule, which, at least at the moment, is absurd. The UN does not have the best interests of America at heart, and granted they're not supposed to, but we as Americans, we are supposed to, and frankly, being part of the UN, it just makes no sense today. We ought to eject them from our shores, stop paying a third of their operating costs, and watch them flounder because everyone is so used to us footing the bill and doing all the dirty work, it would just fall apart without us. And that would be a wonder to behold. The war on terror is important, although we're not actually fighting it any more than we fight any of the other so-called wars we have. It's just a media campaign that we occasionally send money or troops after because it looks good on the news. We're not serious about it at all. We never have been. And unfortunately, we never will be, because it's politically unpopular to actually admit what the problem is, or worse, go wipe it out. Of course, the left's position that we should just give up and worry about global warming is absurd. Did global warming fly airplanes into the Twin Towers and kill nearly 3,000 Americans in a single day? Has global warming committed thousands of terrorist attacks and directly killed thousands of people? They assume wrongly that you can talk radicals out of terrorism, that you can reason with fundamentalists. Sorry, it doesn't work that way. These are fanatics for a reason. The only thing you can do with fanatics is kill them, and we need to get to work. And finally, we get to welfare, which, no surprise, I'm going to go with the conservative side. Welfare doesn't help people in the long term. I'm sorry, lefty losers, but economic life isn't fair. It isn't supposed to be. To the victors go the spoils. You actually have to earn success. It isn't just handed out like Halloween candy. And that means that people, starting when they're young, have to take advantage of the opportunities they're given, like getting an education when they have a chance. That means making good life choices, staying out of trouble, not having children out of wedlock, not doing drugs or joining gangs, getting a job, learning the skills that will make you successful, and moving up in the world. No, you might not become a millionaire overnight, but you will certainly better your position in society, and your children, doing the same things, will be better off than you. It's a slow, deliberate process that demonstrably works. But no, people want everything now. They don't want a better world for their offspring. They want it for themselves right this minute. And I'm sorry, reality doesn't work that way. You have to be in it for the long term. You have to work hard and sacrifice so that down the road, you will be better off. And I'm sorry the left doesn't understand that. So, there you go. Those are my thoughts on all of these subjects. And I was keeping score, if you noticed, and between liberal, conservative, and neither clearly won. Although conservative came in a relatively close second, and liberalism lost completely. And I can't say I'm at all surprised, but what do you think? Did your choices come out differently than mine? Leave me a comment below and let me know. Justify your choices. Leave emotion at the door. That's how thinking rationally works. And we all need to do a lot more of that.
Everything changes.